2004, when Noodle Bar opened to lukewarm reviews, we decided to go for broke. We stopped serving the ramen bar standards and started cooking whatever we felt like. It was a creative atmosphere where there are no bad ideas. I was facing foreclosure. I had nothing to lose. The bank wanted everything. Total failure or complete turnaround were the only options. Luckily, it was the latter. After Momofuku opened, we try to bring that go for broke mentality to everything we do, every dish, concept, and new venture. Taking risks lead to good, new food. Food so good, no one is talking at the table. That's what I see at our restaurants. That's what my chefs see. And we want it to be completely silent. Even though music's playing, that's the best noise a chef can hear. When the customer's not just satisfied, but they're ecstatic, dazed and confused by what they've just tasted. You don't want people to talk. It's not good enough. After they've eaten something, you want them to be like, oh my God, what the fuck just happened? Those types of dishes don't come easily. They often have to be built up and torn down dozens and dozens of times, and even when there's a chance they won't connect with the audience. But with that connection between the chef and the diner, it gives the restaurant their vitality. You know, it's this sort of this trust, this give and take. In over 10 years, I've learned what it means to be a business owner and a boss. So now I place high value on systems, accountability, and organization so we can sort of get that moment more and more. Every day, my cooks and chefs have to balance contradictory ideas. The anarchy that makes the best dishes and the order that makes the best business. It's a paradox that we'll never be able to easily understand or execute because there's a push and pull between order and creativity. It's like I'm mandating that we capture lightning in a bottle and then carefully label and store that bottle on the shelf. It's asking the impossible. As a chef, you're used to being asked to do the impossible. You're constantly striving to be the best. The desire sometimes manifests itself as a kitchen full of yelling. I can tell you personally, that kind of kitchen space is where nobody wants to say anything. They're just too scared. Any kind of creative process reaches a standstill. For a dish to grow, you need feedback. If there's one totalitarian opinion in the kitchen, creativity withers. On the other side of the spectrum, you can have a free-thinking kitchen environment, sort of like this hippie free love stuff. A kitchen where all ideas are good ideas, and every dish is executed. This feel-good zone is equally quiet because cooks are afraid to express criticism. Constructive criticism is a crucial ingredient in any good dish. Those dishes where people just don't know what to say. Great dishes need to run a gauntlet for ideas that is both tough and fair. I used to go back and forth about whether I needed to be more militant or more relaxed, but I've realized our restaurants work best when they're both simultaneously. An environment where cooks have thick skin and a high level of empathy. Being in that zone, that fleeting moment where everything is in balance is rare. In that moment, food becomes more delicious. It could be a 10 or 20 course degustation or a fish taco. That zone is when you're delighting customers. It's like balancing a tipping chair. We have had periods of too much doubt when we were constantly overcorrecting and failing to hit that mark. If there wasn't enough efficiency and structure, we'd bring in a sous chef, an enforcer, a hard ass, a drill sergeant, someone that came from an old school French, punch you in the face kind of kitchen. And those kitchens really did exist, not so much these days. If there's too much structure and order, we'd bring in somebody that just came back from cooking abroad, from a magical place like Mugaritz in San Sebastian, Fat Duck in England and Bray, or El Bulli in Roses, Spain, with their mind full of new ideas and their heads in the clouds. In the golden early days of Noodle Bar, it was just me and a few cooks. And once we ditched the gyoza and the edamame, we started serving dishes with the techniques I learned at various New York top restaurants and cooking abroad in Japan. We created refined food with extraordinary ingredients that wouldn't normally be found in a restaurant in our price range. I just believe good food should be for everybody. I got tired of cooking food on the Upper East Side for really rich people. And if you travel abroad, you'll see that good food is for really everybody and cheaply. And we temporarily found that sweet spot between polished and uninhibited. We honed in on a particular kind of deliciousness that arose from that conflict of my highbrow and lowbrow tastes. Just because cooks make fancy food at fancy restaurants doesn't mean that's what they want to eat. If anything, noodle bar was the expression of fuck you, this is what I'm cooking. Not exactly the classic definition of hospitality, but I felt that hospitality needed a kick in the ass. We were in pursuit of a new kind of hospitality that was meaningful to us and the diner. We happened to stumble upon it at Sambar. At Sambar, my second restaurant, I was really trying to find my voice and plant a flag for Momofuku that would establish itself something other than a one-hit wonder, which Momofuku was. This meant I had to reach further, work harder, risk more than I ever had at Noodle Bar. And I could not have failed bigger than I did with this Asian burrito. I'm not going to put a photo up. In the end, it was blessing in disguise. It allowed me to feel completely free in creating new combinations of food, flavors, and techniques. I had nothing to lose. We were liberated. If we were going to go out of business again, we were going to do it in style. With that very real perspective of losing everything, including the shirt off my back, following the culinary status quo, the traditions of what I should and shouldn't do, just didn't matter anymore. All our bad ideas started to seem like good ideas. And somewhere in that mess, I knew we could find something really delicious. Like most cooks and people who like good food, I like sea urchin. I love sea urchin. I wanted to serve it at Sambar, but in a different way than serve it raw or on rice, as you might see in a Japanese restaurant. Those are very well understood ways of eating it, and I thought cooking it would be an abomination. Cooked uni, you see it sometimes in pasta or risotto, but that's not something I wanted to do either. So I started working on a dish. Eventually, I realized I could maintain and highlight the purity of the sea urchin by serving in a dangerously contrasting environment. I cooked black tapioca pearls like you'd see in bubble tea in pineapple juice and served them in a bowl ripping hot. Way hotter than anybody should ever eat. I had to deal with trying to get the best sea urchin at the time because, purveyors don't want to sell a place called Momofuku, especially really good Santa Barbara sea urchin. And I put that next to the tapioca. We turned tofu into sort of like this whipped cream, very light, in a cloud, and put that on the uni. There was furikake, this sort of Japanese rice seasoning, scallions, yuzu kosho for a citrusy spice, apple juice and for sweetness, which is also high in malic acid, just sort of opens up your palate. It was a full throttle dish that should never have worked, and I would never have done this dish in any other state of mind. And I would not have made it if it just made me feel like I needed to vomit, Trying to serve something really delicious and trying to vomit because it was hot and cold, it was crunchy and soft, sweet and spicy, but after dozens and dozens of iterations, the last one felt like magic. This dish was the catalyst for the rebirth of Sambar, which launched Sambar from being this really failed venture of an Asian burrito into eventually a New York Times 3-star restaurant. And we kept on pushing and pushing and pushing, where we reached as high as number 26 in the world. And again, it's like that's something I found in myself, feeling that nausea, that I have to vomit, is actually something I found in every dish that has been really instrumental in my life. And that's sort of what I'm trying to get to all of my chefs to do, right? That's for me to understand, and not everybody wants to go down that path because it's a hard road, and I feel like I'm growing when I push myself to those limits emotionally, and I get the best out of myself. But, there's some people that don't understand that, and they didn't understand that dish. Critics liked it, chefs loved it, but it's hard to explain to younger cooks or new people how to make a dish like that because you sort of have to lose yourself. All our restaurants, for the most part, are open kitchen. You can see everything, how they eat and how they react. And I can always change a few things to evoke a different response. A little more spicy, a little different knife cut on a vegetable, different texture, it didn't matter. Because I can sort of tailor it as we go. And I always try to go back to that uni dish because there are two things at the same time. And somewhere in that dichotomy, was a secret path to new deliciousness. Again, at that time, I did not know how to explain any of this. I still don't know if I do. But as we continue to grow, I can no longer be omnipresent at the restaurants. Each restaurant is a collaboration between myself and the chefs. Cooking is hard enough. Managing people for me is next to impossible. especially since I can't dangle an attractive bonus, stock options in front of them as an incentive. I can only promise they will get better at their craft, learn better techniques, and be part of a winning team. So I learned to let go a little bit and give chefs the tools to find the balance on their own. Recently, one of my head chefs put this dish on the menu: a beef tongue sandwich on rye with bone marrow soup. And I can't remember what exactly happened other than I saw it in service and I lost my shit. And, he loved the dish. And it just was, the pickup was stupid. It was too long. And for what went in it, there wasn't a return. And, like most young dishes to a young chef's heart, it plays upon something he grew up eating. But it was too over the top. It doesn't look complicated, but there's a lot of stuff going on there. It's too complicated. It relied on nostalgia instead of actual appeal. Talking about it, the story adds up. But just because a dish makes sense doesn't mean it's going to work. And it definitely didn't work, You have the bone marrow soup, you have fried cornichons. I still can't believe we served it. And worst of all, it was a safe move for him. He put nothing at stake. It was not reaching for high or low. It was reaching for the middle, which I am vehemently against. He wasn't trying to make people forget where they were. He wasn't trying to transport them to that sort of level of ecstasy that I want. He wasn't risking anything. When I was younger and didn't know any better, I would have thrown that dish across the restaurant in a full crowded restaurant in a fit of rage. But this moment in time in the restaurant, I just chilled out. And I decided to let it play out. I told him to look at the sales. I told him, more importantly, look at the plates coming back to the kitchen, because that tells you everything. And I knew there would be too many half-eaten dishes of beef tongue and bone marrow soup. He wasn't cooking for the customer. He was making the dish for himself. Even though it looked a little different, you could get those flavors at any Jewish delicatessen. And I wanted him to take those flavors to a whole new level, or make it the best version anyone had ever seen. And that's the mindset you have to have. I firmly believe that. It was neither. Ultimately, he took it off on his own accord. I didn't have to humiliate him. And if I had demanded he remove the dish, it would have crushed him. He wouldn't have learned anything from that experience. And I would have lost one of the most talented cooks I've ever hired or had the pleasure of working with. And we worked on it, trying to get him to think about flavors and textures and making food that would evoke that response from a customer. And I wasn't looking for an immediate return on this investment. It's not instant gratification, and that's hard for a chef, because we get into this business because we want everything to be instant, the here and the now. But I'm trying to see both short and long-term plays. Long-term, he's going to learn to better critique his own dishes. And this is a dish that he came up next, a few months later. And he's trying to build his confidence, and this is one of the best dishes I've ever had. And it's sort of a same thing. It's a sandwich. It's an open-faced sandwich. There's texture from the pickled hearts of palm on top. There's, the sardines for a little bit of fat, and hozon, which you'll taste a little bit later. It's just a great, great dish, and very simple and very complicated. So, I tried to make sure that we teach failure. And trying to get better at teaching failure, we needed to sort of systemize what we were doing. So in 2010, we launched our Culinary Lab. And we were in the pursuit of trying to find anything. We actually had no idea what the hell was going on. It was sort of in vogue to have a lab at the time. And it's hard to fail, intentionally fail, when you have dinner service, you have customers, you have plumbing disasters. There's just the worst things that can happen. And in the lab, I could create a structure where there was sort of this go for broke mentality every day, where we could document it and take this sort of scientific approach to food that we had never done before. This freedom of failure led to the creation of hozon and banji. This project started considering everyday items in our kitchen that we didn't quite understand. Katsuobushi, which is used to make Japanese dashi, soy sauce, misos, are fundamental Japanese ingredients. But we didn't really know how they were made, and we didn't know if we could make them in the East Village instead of Japan. So I had the bright idea that our goal was to make the best versions of that in the world. After going to Japan many times and seeing how they were making it, I was like, we can do this. And, we started to make soy sauce, and then we realized, could we make it with something else? Could we swap it out for New York State grains, legumes, and proteins that are based locally? As far as we know, this was the first time anyone tried to substitute these ingredients. We wanted to pay homage to these classic Japanese culinary staples. But at the same time, we wanted to destroy them because we felt we could do it better. And we're not there yet, but we're going to get there. To us, replacing those traditions meant steering away and creating our own. After all, if you fundamentally understand Japanese cuisine, it's not about using the real thing or something authentic. It's about what's using fresh and what's close to you, really paying respect to the terroir around you. The idea of importing these goods was the antithesis of Japanese food to me. So in a way, we started cooking real Japanese food because we were making all our own products. The results were astounding. A holy shit moment. Hopefully you'll taste that outside. These products did not fall into our laps. They were a lot of work over 4 years of research and development, and currently used in restaurants around the country. The lab was given the freedom to fail big, really fail big, and the space to refine as they went. The freedom to create this type of structure, to understand and to evolve is the only way Momofuku, my cooks, can evolve. Preserving that as environment is our number one goal. As a chef, you learn to salt to taste. Everyone's cooked here, everyone's salted something. And you taste as you go, and you taste and you adjust seasoning. You taste and adjust seasoning. Eventually, it becomes intuition. No one is born with it. You learn from over-seasoning, and you learn from under-seasoning. My role as a chef now is to not provide the tools, to measure exactly how much salt, because there's some restaurants that measure exactly to the milligram. I want to create that intuition where people feel like they're in that structure and chaos, and I think in that dichotomy, they're going to be able to know what really great food is. And when new cooks ask me how much salt they need to add to a dish, I tell them to over-season and under-season at the same time. I try to apply that paradox to everything we do. Thank you very much.